You cannot trust the communists, and the Kuomintang should know that from their history. And I think, if you look at the legacy of the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek and also Jiang Jingguo, Jiang Jieshi, they were very clear about the nature of communism. So you can't really talk with them. You can't have a united front with them. It will end badly.
Hi everyone, and welcome to 新闻硬邦邦and Freedom is Not Free channels. My name is Stan. Today, I am visiting one of the most influential think tanks here in Washington, D.C., America First Policy Institute, and I have an honor to talk to Piero Tozzi again. Piero, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in my show.
Of course, it's great to see you. I'm in a different role this time, but it's good to be here, and I really enjoyed our last conversation, so thank you.
Thank you. And for everyone who didn't see the last video, you should see this one. Piero is currently the Senior Director for China Policy at the America First Policy Institute, where he focuses on U.S. strategy toward China and broader Indo-Pacific security issues. Before joining AFPI, he spent years on Capitol Hill in senior roles, including as Deputy Staff Director and Staff Director at Congressional Executive Commission on China. So, Piero, first question I'd like to discuss with you is the issue that all the Taiwanese people are talking about right now is KMT chairwoman郑丽文is visiting China right now. And what do you think about this visit?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea. You cannot trust the communists, and the Kuomintang should know that from their history. And I think, if you look at the legacy of the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek and also Jiang Jingguo, Jiang Jieshi, they were very clear about the nature of communism. So you can't really talk with them. You can't have a united front with them. It will end badly. I do think that it's important to keep in mind, though, that there are different shades of blue, and I don't think that the entirety of the Kuomintang is supportive of that trip. So I think sometimes, we do try to simplify things as black and white, but there are certainly some gray nuance in there as well.
And what signals does this visit send to both the KMT supporters in Taiwan and to the United States?
Well, I think that the KMT has a perception problem in the United States that I think is that they are pro-China, and like I said, there are nuances. I don't, Mayor Liu from Taichung was in D.C. Recently, and I think her view is quite different. And it's good that both members of the DPP and the KMT and TPP as well, come to Washington to explain, their various positions and their view on relations with the mainland and the threat that emanates from the mainland is something we would encourage. In fact, that's something that we'd conveyed to Taiwan as well. I did, and AIT did, that she should come to America. But it does. I don't think it's a good look. I don't think it's a good look for the Kuomintang, and I think it is a mistake. You cannot trust the communists.
So you think that she might be used by the CCP?
Yeah, I think that they're using it to divide Taiwanese society and also divide the Kuomintang too, because again, these different views. I think what you really need in Taiwan is greater unity. There's a lot of blue versus green. We got white mixed in too. It's important though that people understand that the real enemy is the red. Okay, and to build Team Taiwan, it should be Teal Taiwan. Teal, of course, is that color when you merge blue and green. And there really needs, I think, to be unity on this front with that threat from mainland China, from the Chinese Communist Party, and that's something that people really need to take seriously in both parties. From an American perspective, that is an outside perspective, but a near outsider.
So there is a need for unity of the Taiwanese people.
Yeah, absolutely, and you have to have the idea of a loyal opposition too. So that means that the Kuomintang should act loyally and not go to Chen Liwen's visit. That's bad, but also the DPP should not demonize all legislators. So when there was the recall election, there's a big difference from someone like Fu Quanqi, who I think was a legitimate target of the recall, and Jiang Qichun, who's much more reasonable, and you want to have relationships with that. So I guess to the extent that I'm able to convey that to an audience, guys, kind of get your act together and work together against what is really a threat, and that's communist China.
Yeah, because the main enemy is not in Taiwan; it's
right.
On the other side of the Taiwan Strait.
And they want to divide Taiwanese society. That's why their offensive is they would like to win without war.
Yeah.
So they put an emphasis on cognitive warfare, the cognitive battle. They cultivate these Taiwan skepticism and American skepticism narratives, including directed at the U.S. So that Yimeilun, Yitailun, that's something that we need to guard against.
I'm talking about these issues right now. Operation Epic Fury is going on in the Middle East and Iran. It revealed overwhelming U.S. military power. But what is the single lesson that Beijing should learn from Operation Epic Fury? I
think what's interesting, and we will be coming out with a piece on this, but Iran was sort of China's counter pivot. We've talked for decades now about that pivot to Asia, and the United States, first with the Iraq War, and but much of that, of course, was fueled by Iran. So Iran has created trouble throughout the Middle East. It supported groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. And that kept us from being able to turn our attention to China. So I think one of the outcomes is that we will be able to really pivot to Asia finally. So that is certainly, I think, a positive that comes to fruition.
You guys at America First right now are working on a research of China-Iran cooperation. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about that? Is it diplomatic only, or real technology, missile and intelligence?
So I think, stepping back a second, so China, I think the way to think about communist China, it's not simply an economic rival of the United States. It's not simply a strategic rival even. It's a systemic one. So it wants to overturn the entire American-led international order and replace it with one of its own devising. And so part of that, you see the BRICS, you see the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you see a number of things. You also see efforts at the United Nations to reframe human rights, the right to development instead of individual rights, civil and political rights that are held against the government. So it's an all-purpose thing, economic as well, trying to replace the petrodollar with the petro-yuan. But Iran was really a key part of that. And China supplied it with surveillance technology so that it could spy on its own people. It supplied it with weaponry, and a lot of Iran's weaponry was sort of reverse engineered, and they also got weapons from the Soviet Union. But a lot of the architecture for that came from China. I think we've seen kind of one of the takeaways, one of the perceptions, both with Venezuela and the operation there that got rid of Maduro, and now Epic Fury, and before that Midnight Hammer, I think is the failure of these surveillance system, or these systems, air defense systems there. So the extent that you do have Chinese components to that, and that was involved. I don't want to overstate that aspect of it, but that also, I think, does worry Beijing, and I think they also were worried that the surveillance system that China had provided Iran was hacked, and they were able to track down that. I know there's speculation on the Chinese internet, which has not been verified, that Xi Jinping is paranoid and he arrested certain Hikvision officers. I don't think that's been verified, but at all. But the fact that there are these there's a certain level of paranoia and instability in Beijing anyway. Xi Jinping, he did remove Zhang Youxia, who really was a counter rival to him, but he still has not fully gained the control over the People's Liberation Army. So that leadership situation, I think, is more brittle than we sometimes seem to think it is.
Iran has been using the Strait of Hormuz as strategic leverage. What should Taiwan learn from that about choke points and economic warfare?
So when I was in Taiwan, July of last year at this Ocean Affairs Ministry Forum, one of the points that I made is, you should not be getting your LNG from vulnerable sources. Taiwan gets a lot from Qatar, and that, I think, has created a vulnerability there. The U.S. LNG, we have Alaska, also I think Louisiana, though it hasn't fully come online yet, that also comes with a guarantee from the U.S. Navy. And that's, I think, an important point. So that when you are getting your LNG from U.S. sources, that, I think, does bind us more closely together, and I think that's very important. It's also important countering that American skepticism narrative that we spoke about. But Taiwan really is going to need energy, sources of energy, especially if it's going to lead in AI and chips manufacturing. It does need stable sources of energy.
In the case of a blockade.
In the case of a blockade, and just in general, too. These new technologies, really, AI in particular, are so energy intensive. And I think that really means moving towards more green nuclear technology. And I know this is a political issue because of the DPP's origins as part of the anti-nuclear environmental movement.
They're adjusting right now.
Well, I think they are.
President Lai has delivered
President Lai has done that, and it also, it's clean energy. So if you look at the molten salt technology and these small nuclear reactors, that also, I think, are safer too. They can disperse them, and Taiwan. There are these tectonic plates. We know from earthquakes in Taiwan that. But these small plants are a lot safer, and you don't have these half-lives that are measured in centuries. And so it produces water. So it is, I think, an emerging technology. We're going to see Taiwan move towards that to meet its energy needs.
And this is where American support is required, because America is leader in this technology.
America, but also Korea and other. So I think it's something where, and I think we need to see closer integration. We've integrated more closely with Japan and also the Philippines. That first island chain, and that's really, Taiwan is the corner, the centerpiece of that, the cornerstone, and that underscores the strategic importance of Taiwan and why the United States really is invested in, I think, Taiwan remaining independent of communist Chinese control, and so too Japan and the Philippines. And we do want to see Korea as part of that as well. A colleague of mine was just in Korea, and something that we've talked about, and I'll be going there as well. We should see the Quad evolve into a Quint and to bring South Korea on board.
Steve Yates is in Korea right now as well.
So Steve with Heritage and Fred Fleitz with America First, and then I'll be going there in a couple of weeks.
Do you think it's possible under the current administration in Korea?
I think that's a very sensitive topic. I think it was more, the Yoon administration was more aligned, and one of the things I think we want to message in Korea is that you have to be very wary of engagement with the Chinese communists. And just as the Kuomintang needs to be reminded, so too I think the Koreans, go back to the Korean War, 1950, and the communist Chinese coming over the Yalu River. And, America and Korea have a special, that alliance is special because it was an alliance that was, forged in blood. The shared bloodshed of Americans and Koreans that fought to keep Korea democratic. So we just want to, they are important allies of the United States, and we do want to reinforce that that message to the Korean people.
What does the F-15 incident tell China about U.S. vulnerabilities in contested airspace and about America's willingness to recover and protect its people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing it wasn't an F-35, right? Look, in any war, you're going to have losses, and really, it's and every life is, of course, sacred.
Yep.
Every man's death doth diminish me, but in war there will be casualties. I think the fact, though, that we did expend such effort shows that we do value human life, and that's also in Taiwan too. There's we do value human life as well, and that's something that the communists don't. That is both a strength but also sort of a vulnerability too, because we do have to be, I think, willing to make sacrifices. As you say, freedom is not free, and it does entail a certain amount of sacrifice and willingness to do that. But to that end, though, if you want peace, you prepare for war.
Civis pacem para bellum.
Para bellum, exactly, and that I think is important. No one wants war, but it is important to be ready and to show that willingness. And that's something I think that Taiwan across the board does need to show that commitment. It was good that Tsai Ing-wen finally increased the draft age, but it was very different when I was first in Taiwan in 1988, a year after martial law was lifted. All young men did 2 years minimum, and it was hard service. They were conscripted. I think in the case of the Taiwanese Marines, it was 2.5 years. So that is, I think one needs to have that frontline mentality that, it's because Taiwan really is precious. You have such a beautiful country, we'll call it that. It really is, I think, special. But just as the way the United States is special too, it's the willingness of American citizen soldiers to defend our country and our way of life over the years, and I think Taiwan has to have that mindset as well.
And the final question: if you were advising Taiwan after Operation Epic Fury, what would the top 3 changes Taiwan should make immediately be?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's important, and I know there are efforts to develop technology and develop also co-production jointly. I think Taiwan can really contribute in that regard, and that we should work together more. However, that does need to address a vulnerability then too, and that is Taiwan really needs to take its security a lot better. There is Chinese espionage, CCP espionage that's directed towards Taiwan. And it's not just the Kuomintang, the DPP has been targeted as well. The military has been targeted. I think it's
Minister of Foreign Affairs as well.
Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Speaker of the former President of the Legislative Yuan. So that is something that one really needs to take seriously to increase that. And the United States can help with that. I do think it's positive that Lai Ching-te, again, sort of playing against type, he called for military tribunals if there's spies in the military, and that's a big step, because just as he's kind of breaking new ground on the environmental issues, there is this residual fear of the martial law period among his core supporters. Yet he understands the importance there for Taiwan's survival. So he has, I believe, called for military tribunals to be reinstated as to military personnel that are involved in espionage. And generally, I think the punishments have to be more enhanced for that, to have a real deterrent effect.
Thank you, Piero, and thanks everyone for watching, and don't forget to follow with the America First Policy Institute, one of the most influential think tanks right now. Thank you. See you in the next one.